The first time the story came into my living room, it was wrapped in bright graphics, dramatic music, and the confident voice of a national news anchor who had no idea what kind of quiet damage his words were about to do to people like me. "Tonight," he said, "a beloved small-town sheriff, his secret affair, and an alleged murder-for-hire plot that turned deadly power, betrayal, and a wife pushed to the edge." I remember the fork in my hand shaking as the screen cut to the mugshot. The whole country saw a disgraced lawman. I saw the face of a man I'd known for 30 years, a man whose laugh I could still hear in my kitchen, a man whose wife used to bring over casseroles on Sundays. But that's not why my hand shook. My hand shook because I also knew the girl. The news packages never tell you everything. They don't tell you what it smells like when your world starts burning down slowly, months before the fire engines show up on TV. They don't tell you how many times a person has to look the other way before life forces them to look straight into the ugliest part of the truth. What you're about to hear isn't what made it on the 6 o'clock broadcast. It's everything that came before and everything that came after. The phone calls that weren't recorded, the conversations behind closed doors, the silences at dinner tables, the quiet calculations made in the dark. Because long before the cameras arrived, there was a sheriff who thought he was in control, a young woman who thought she was finally being seen, and a wife who thought she knew exactly how far she'd go to save her life from becoming a punchline. Only one of them really understood what it meant to be pushed to the edge, and the edge always looks a lot closer in hindsight. This is how it really happened. The town of Willow Fork sits like a spilled handful of houses between two long stretches of nothing. Out here, you measure distance in gas tank levels and time in school years. People remember when you were that kid who flipped his daddy's truck, or the girl who used to sing in the church choir, and they don't stop remembering. For more than a decade, Sheriff Daniel Clay had been the closest thing we had to a local celebrity tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who looked right at home leaning against a patrol SUV with his thumbs hooked in his duty belt. He'd been on billboards during the last election, smiling in uniform, American flag behind him, slogan underneath, "Protecting what matters." He rode in the front car at the July 4th parade. He shook every hand and kissed every baby and called everybody ma'am or sir. Even the teenagers, people trusted him in that way country folks reserve for the church pastor and whoever holds the keys to the jail. He met his wife Linda long before the badge. They were high school sweethearts who did everything in the correct order. Marriage, starter house, his job at the county, her job at the bank. Then their one daughter, Emily, who left for college and never moved back. If you asked most people in Willow Forks to name a solid couple, the Clays would make the list. That's what made it almost impossible to believe the first rumor when it started whispering its way through town. "She's too young," I remember saying the first time someone dared to tell me. My cousin Nora had brought it up like she was sharing a recipe. We were standing by the potato salad at a baby shower, paper plates in our hands. She angled her body so we were turned away from everyone else, which in our town is how you know something is either sacred or scandalous. "You didn't hear?" she asked, eyes getting wider. "He's been seeing that girl who just started at the diner." "The one with the big hair always wears those hoop earrings." "Elena," I guessed, and instantly felt my stomach drop. Because I did know her, not just as that girl at the diner. I knew the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she got nervous. I knew she liked her coffee with too much sugar. I knew she had dreams bigger than her tips jar. Back when she was 16 and still in high school, she babysat my nephews. She used to sit at my counter after I got home from my late shift at the hospital, waiting for her mom to pick her up, and she'd talk about leaving town, going somewhere warm near the water. "Just for a while," she'd say. "I just want to see something else." Now here she was, 3 years later, 20 years old and stuck waiting tables on the highway, and people were saying she was sleeping with the sheriff. "I don't believe it," I told Nora. Nora leaned in closer. "My sister's husband seen them." Late he was coming back from a run. Sheriff's truck parked way behind the diner. Lights off, girl getting in on the passenger side, real cozy. I wanted to laugh it off. I wanted to say people misread things all the time, except there had been other little things. A story I'd heard from one of the deputies about the sheriff staying late at the office a lot more lately. A neighbor mentioning that Linda had started showing up alone to church, sitting with her jaw clenched. Those things hadn't meant anything by themselves. Rumors are like puzzle pieces. They don't form a picture until you have too many of them in your hand. 2 weeks after that baby shower, I saw it with my own eyes. The diner sits off Route 19, tucked between a closed feed store and a yard full of rusted-out tractors. The neon open sign has been flickering for as long as anybody can remember. That evening, the sky was bruised purple, heat lightning low on the horizon. I'd stopped in for coffee on my way home from a late shift, half from habit, half because the house felt too quiet. The place was nearly empty, just a trucker at the far end, and an older couple sharing a slice of pie. I slid into my usual booth. Then I saw him. Sheriff Clay was already there, sitting in the corner booth near the back, the one that always seemed a little more in the shadows. No uniform tonight, just a faded button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, his badge and gun nowhere in sight. Across from him sat Elena, her hair up in a messy bun, her hoop earrings catching the light every time she laughed at something he said. They weren't touching. They weren't doing anything you could point a camera at and call proof. But there was something in the way he leaned in toward her, forearms on the table, eyes warm and soft. Something in the way she smiled at him, like she'd finally found someone who saw her. I watched him reach out and, for a fraction of a second, brush his fingers against her wrist. You can tell yourself you're just imagining things, but your body knows when a line's being crossed. Mine knew the heat climbed up my neck, and I suddenly felt like I'd walked into a movie I wasn't supposed to see. They didn't notice me, or if they did, they chose not to. After a few minutes, he slid out of the booth, tossed some cash on the table, and left. She stayed behind, gathering plates, cheeks flushed. As he walked past my booth, I caught a whiff of his cologne. He glanced down, saw me, and in that split second, something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, then calculation. "Evenin'," he said, as if we'd just bumped into each other at the grocery store. "Evening, Sheriff," I replied, my voice steady in a way my heartbeat wasn't. He held my gaze a second too long, then smiled that practiced politician's smile and walked out into the night. I watched his taillights disappear through the window, the red glow bleeding into the dark. Behind me, I heard the rattle of plates. When I turned, Elena was standing there with the coffee pot in her hand, frozen. Our eyes met and her mouth parted like she was going to say something. Then she didn't. "Top you off?" she asked instead, lifting the pot a little. "Sure," I said. As she poured, her hand shook just enough to make a thin brown ripple against the white ceramic. She noticed that I noticed. A flush climbed up her throat. "You okay, honey?" I asked softly. She swallowed, eyes darting toward the door where his truck had just been. "Yeah," she lied, "just tired." If that had been the end of it, it would have just been another small town secret. People have affairs all the time. They lie. They get caught. They cry and forgive and sometimes divorce, and the world doesn't end. But what no one noticed then, not the man with the badge, not the girl with the daydreams, not the wife sitting at home, was that one little choice had just set off a chain reaction. And chains, once they start moving, are hard to stop. By late summer, there were no more rumors. There were only facts people were trying to pretend were rumors. The first fact was that Sheriff Clay had started losing weight, not in a healthy way. In a, "my belt's a notch tighter and my eyes are a little too bright" way. The second was that his wife, Linda, had developed the look of someone who hadn't slept through the night in weeks. She started showing up at the pharmacy more often, buying headache meds and those over-the-counter sleep aids, her smile brittle. The third was that a 20-year-old waitress had been seen getting into the sheriff's truck too many times for anyone to say it was innocent. But the fact that ripped everything open came out in a way no one expected. The town fair had just ended, and the air still smelled like fried dough when Linda walked into the sheriff's office one Tuesday afternoon. Reception said she'd been clutching 2 manila envelopes in her hand so tightly her knuckles were white. No one knows exactly what happened behind his closed office door. Deputies heard raised voices through the walls, hers sharp and shaking, his low and controlled. One of them said he heard something crash, maybe a picture frame. What we do know is this: 15 minutes later, Linda stormed out of that office, eyes red, face set. One envelope was missing. The other was still in her hand. She drove straight to the bank where she worked, walked into the break room, and put the envelope in front of her friend Carol on the table. "Read it," she said. Inside were printed screenshots of text messages, dozens of them. Once you took away the stripped-out timestamps and contact names, they looked like the usual mix of small-town gossip and steamy late-night foolishness. Except this was the sheriff. And the words were enough to make anyone's stomach twist. Can't stop thinking about you. I'll leave as soon as I can, baby. She doesn't understand me the way you do. There was one message that would later run on every news broadcast over and over until it felt like part of the wallpaper of American Scandal. I'd give up everything just to start over with you. The contact name at the top of the screenshots was D. The number matched the sheriff's private cell. Behind those messages, if you scrolled up far enough, there was another kind of message, one that would never be read aloud on TV. The ones where she told him she was late. The ones where she sent him a picture of a little white stick with a pink plus sign. The ones where she said, "Danny, please call me, I'm scared." When the news broke in our town, it didn't come from a reporter. It came from the church prayer chain. By that Sunday, half the congregation had already heard some version of the story. Pastor Mike tried to preach about forgiveness, but you could feel the words sliding off people like rain off a steel roof. Linda sat alone in the third pew, shoulders squared, eyes fixed straight ahead. The sheriff wasn't there. His absence sat in the room like a shadow. After the service, people clustered in the parking lot, whispering. No one went up to her. Grief is welcome in a small town. Humiliation is something else. It's like everyone thinks it's contagious. I watched her lift her chin, get in her car, and drive away. Later that afternoon, I found out from Nora what had pushed her over the edge. It wasn't just the affair, Nora said, voice pitched low over the phone. It's that the girl's pregnant. The words rang in my ear like a bell. Pregnant. In one instant, everything that had seemed like something that might blow over snapped into something permanent. A messy affair is one thing, a child makes it forever. She found out from his phone, Nora continued. He left it on the dresser. Apparently the girl had been trying to call him all night. He just silenced it. She waited until he went to take a shower and she opened the messages. It was all right there. I hung up the phone and just sat there staring at my own reflection in the black TV screen. Somewhere in that tangle of texts was a scared young woman, a furious wife, and a man trying to keep a dozen lies in the air at once. Someone was going to get hurt. I just didn't know how badly. Later that week, I saw Elena. She was sitting on the curb behind the diner on her smoke break, hunched over, her apron balled up in her lap. The late afternoon sun made a halo out of the stray hairs escaping her ponytail. The parking lot smelled like grease and asphalt. You're not old enough for that, I said, nodding toward the cigarette between her fingers as I walked over. She looked up, startled, then rolled her eyes. I'm old enough for a lot of things, apparently, she muttered. I sat down beside her without asking, the curb warm through my jeans. You heard? She asked after a few seconds. This town's not real good at keeping secrets, I answered. She let out a humorless laugh and took another drag. Her hand trembled, just like in the diner weeks before. But now there was no coffee cup between us, no sheriff in the booth, just the rawness. I didn't mean for it to happen, she said, staring straight ahead at nothing. At first, it was just nice to have someone listen. Remember my dad? She glanced at me finally, and I nodded. Sheriff Clay was the one who came out after we found him. He stayed with us until the coroner got there. After that, he'd check in at the diner, ask how my mom was doing. How I was doing, he made me feel like I wasn't invisible. I remembered seeing him at the diner more often after her father died, the way he'd stand at the counter, hand on her shoulder, asking if she was okay. What happened? I asked. She flicked ash into the gravel. He told me he wasn't happy, she said quietly. That he loved his wife, but he'd married too young. That they were more like roommates now. He said he could see himself starting over. That once his daughter was out on her own, he'd have more freedom. He never promised anything exactly. But he didn't not promise, you know? I did know words can be arranged like furniture so they don't technically block any doors, but you still trap someone inside. And then you got pregnant, I said gently. She nodded once, jaw tightening. I told him, she said, and everything changed. He stopped coming by the diner. He started calling from different numbers. He kept saying we just needed time, that he was going to tell her, that he was waiting for the right moment. She scoffed. I guess she found the moment for him. There was a long silence. "What do you want?" I asked. She took a breath like it hurt. "I want him to be who he said he was," she whispered. "I want him to show up. I don't want to be the girl everybody points at in the grocery store, like I stole something. I didn't go looking for this." Her hand drifted down to her stomach, flat under the apron. "Have you told your mom?" I asked. She shook her head hard. "She's got enough to worry about, and she loves him, you know. The sheriff. He's the one who got us that rent reduction after Dad died. If she knew I slept with him..." Her voice broke. Tears gathered in her eyes but didn't fall. "Have you seen him?" I asked. "Once," she said after a moment. "2 nights ago. He called and said we needed to talk. We met in that church parking lot off Old Mill Road so nobody'd see us. He said he needed time. That this was a mistake that had gotten out of control. That he cared about me, but he couldn't lose everything. Not his job, not his pension, not his reputation. He said the town wouldn't understand." Her eyes filled with sudden anger. "I told him I'm the one who won't be able to get a decent job when everybody finds out," she said. "I'm the one who's going to have a baby's mouth to feed. He's worried about his reputation. I'm worried about whether I can afford diapers." I felt something hot and bitter rise in my chest. "What did he say to that?" I asked. She laughed once, short and sharp. "He said he'd take care of it. Child support. That kind of thing. But he wouldn't say it out loud, like he couldn't even bring himself to say the word. Just it, like I'm some problem he has to manage." She stared down at the extinguished cigarette in her hand, then dropped it and ground it out under her heel. "Maybe I should just go to the news myself," she said suddenly, glancing at me. "Tell them everything. Make sure he can't just skate away clean. Why should I be quiet while he plays the family man on TV?" The thought made my stomach clench. "Do you really want that?" I asked softly. "Your face on TV? Your baby's business out there before it's even born? People can be cruel, especially when they only know half the story." She fell quiet again. "I don't know what I want," she admitted. "I just know I'm scared. And he's the one person who's supposed to help, and he's acting like I'm the enemy." I looked at her, really looked, and saw the scared teenager under the hard edges. I saw a child who'd found a father figure in a man who couldn't even be a husband to his own wife without lying. "Do you have a doctor yet?" I asked. "Next month," she said, "county clinic." I called myself. He said he'd go with me if he could make it work. I haven't heard from him since. In that moment, I knew something with a clarity that burned. The sheriff was out of his depth. He was trying to juggle his life like it was evidence bags, labeling and stacking and pretending none of it would spill. People like that end up making desperate, stupid choices. But when I thought about danger then, I thought about him. I was wrong. The most dangerous person in this story wasn't the man with the badge. It was the woman who'd spent 30 years watching him. The first time the sheriff appeared on national TV, it was for something trivial. Over a decade ago, a clip of him rescuing a lost toddler during a flash flood had made the rounds. He'd been younger then, hair darker, uniform crisp. The news anchor had called him a real-life hero in a small-town sheriff's badge. People in Willow Forks had been so proud. We'd crowded around TV screens and pointed, "That's our sheriff," we said. I remembered that night because Linda had thrown a watch party. She'd made queso dip and pigs in a blanket, and we'd all stood in her living room watching her husband on the screen. She'd sat on the arm of his chair, hand on his shoulder, beaming. Now the cameras were back, but this time, nobody was beaming. The national news didn't descend right away. Scandals start local. They begin as a story in the county paper with a reluctant headline, then a whisper in the next town over, then a rumor that walks across state lines via Facebook. The first real blow came 3 weeks after that meeting in the church parking lot. The sheriff's daughter, Emily, had come home. People saw her at the Walmart, walking 3 steps ahead of her father, her body stiff. She was 23 now, trying out adulthood on her own in the city she'd left Willow Forks, promising herself she'd never live where everyone knew everything about you. Now she was back, and everyone knew anyway. They say the argument at the Clay house that night could be heard half a block away. Some neighbors said they heard a woman scream. Others said they heard something heavy slam into a wall. No one called the sheriff's office. You don't dial 911 on the sheriff. The next morning, he showed up to work with a cut on his hand and a look that could cut glass. Linda didn't show up at the bank. Her car was still in the driveway, but the blinds were drawn. 3 days later, she walked into the office of the county prosecutor. What happened in that office would later be debated endlessly on talk shows and podcasts. People would argue about her intention, her mental state, her level of desperation. Was she asking for help, or was she planting a seed? All we know is what the prosecutor's assistant heard through the door. "I can't just ignore this, Linda," the prosecutor said, his voice low but strained. "You're asking me to file charges against my own sheriff based on text messages and your suspicions about his intentions." "I am asking you," she replied, her voice shaking but steady, "to stop acting like he is above the law because he wears a badge. If any other man in this county had done what he's done, you'd be all over it. He got that girl pregnant. He's trying to pressure her into doing something she doesn't want. And he's telling me to just handle it and smile for the cameras." "I understand you're angry. You don't understand," she snapped. "My whole life is a punchline now. Do you know what it's like to go to the grocery store and feel people staring at you, pitying you? Do you know what it's like to lie in bed next to someone and know every time his phone buzzes that it might be her?" There was a pause. The assistant said she heard the rustle of papers. "Look," the prosecutor said, softening, "marital issues are one thing, but you're talking about criminal charges. Coercion, intimidation, those are strong words. Has he threatened her? Has he harmed her?" "He doesn't have to lay a hand on her to ruin her life," Linda replied. "He's got everything, she's got nothing. That's a kind of violence, whether you want to write it in your little legal code or not. Even if I open an investigation," he said, "it'll tear this county apart. You understand that? It'll be people picking sides, you versus him, the mistress versus you, the press." "The press?" she cut in. "Oh, they're coming. You think you can keep this quiet? You think word hasn't already leaked about the text messages? He's not going to get out of this clean. I'm just giving you the chance to be on the right side when the tide hits." There was another long pause. "I need more than what you've brought me," the prosecutor said finally. "I need something concrete, a threat, a payment, a recording. Otherwise, this is a marriage falling apart, not a crime." Another woman might have broken down then. She might have cried, thrown up her hands, walked out defeated. Not Linda. "Fine," she said quietly. "If you need something concrete, I'll get it." No one knew what she meant at the time. We would find out. Around that same time, the sheriff took a leave of absence for personal reasons. That's what the press release said. It was shared on the county website and printed in the back pages of the newspaper. A temporary appointment was made. Deputies started answering calls with a new name on their lips. Nobody believed it was just personal. The talk in town shifted from, "Do you think it's true?" to, "What's going to happen to him?" His supporters said it was a private matter. "Let the man deal with his business," they said. "He's done a lot of good for this county. Don't throw him away over a mistake." Others weren't so forgiving. "He arrested my boy for marijuana," one man fumed at the bar. "Dragged him in like he was some big-time drug dealer. But he can sleep with a girl the same age and walk around like he's Mr. Law and order? No, sir." Meanwhile, Elena's belly was starting to show. She'd left the diner and started cleaning houses instead, where fewer people would see her. I heard through the grapevine that she was living back at her mom's place full-time now, sleeping in her childhood room with posters still on the wall. Her mom thought she'd just gained a little weight. Denial can be powerful. One evening, as the sun slid behind the pine trees and turned everything gold, I saw a black sedan with out-of-state plates parked near the courthouse. Two men in suits stood on the sidewalk talking to a deputy. They looked wrong against our dusty brick buildings, like they'd been cut out of another picture and pasted in. National media. They'd heard the story. In today's world, a disgraced cop with a messy love life is boring. But a small-town sheriff, a pregnant mistress, and whispers of something darker, coercion, threats, a wife, on the warpath. That was the kind of thing producers built whole segments around. It started as a small piece on a cable news show, a couple of talking heads shaking their heads over yet another lawman caught abusing his power. They put up his campaign photo next to a blurry picture of Elena leaving the clinic. Then someone dug up his old hero sheriff saves toddler clip and cut them together. The fall from grace narrative was irresistible. The phones at the county office lit up, reporters called, demanding statements. Someone leaked the text messages, maybe from the prosecutor's office, maybe from the bank, maybe from a betrayed friend. Screenshots hit social media. You couldn't open your phone without seeing his words to her, highlighted and dissected by strangers. The town went quiet in that way it does when a storm is just offshore. No one knew yet how strong it would be when it hit, but we could feel the pressure drop. Inside the clay house, something had hardened. According to a friend of Emily's, the daughter had confronted her father 2 nights after the first national story aired. "You made us a joke," she told him. "I went to class today and people had your face pulled up on their phones. My roommate asked if your mistress was my age or younger. Do you have any idea what that feels like?" "I said I'm sorry," he replied, pacing the kitchen.
"You keep saying that," she snapped. "Like sorry is a magic word. You slept with someone barely older than me."
"You got her pregnant and now Mom can't go to the grocery store without having to abandon her cart because people won't stop staring." He slammed his hand on the countertop. "I know I messed up," he shouted. "But I am still your father and I won't be talked to like..." "Like what?" she shot back. "Like a man who lied to everyone, including himself." Her voice dropped then. "What scares me," she said, "is that I don't think this is the first time you've lied. I just think this is the first time you got sloppy." He froze. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked. "I grew up watching you," she said. "Watching you tell people what they needed to hear so they'd calm down, or vote for you, or stop asking questions. You're really good at it. You could have gone far, Dad. State office, maybe. But you couldn't keep it zipped. All for what? To feel young? To feel powerful?" He turned away, jaw working. "You don't understand," he said. "You're young. You've never..." "Don't," she cut in sharply. "Don't you dare tell me this is some midlife crisis thing I'm too young to understand. You didn't buy a sports car. You didn't grow out a ponytail, you destroyed Mom." She grabbed her keys. "I'm staying at Aunt Carol's," she said. "I can't be here right now. Emily, come on." She paused at the door. "Do you still see her?" she asked without turning around. He hesitated. Hesitation, in that moment, was louder than any answer. "Right," she said, "that's what I thought." She left the door slammed. A picture rattled on the wall. In the quiet that followed, he did something he regretted more than any text he'd ever sent. He made a phone call, not to his wife, not to his daughter, not to the girl carrying his child. He called an old contact. Every town has that one person everyone knows, but no one admits to knowing. In Willow Forks, that person was a man named Wally Griggs. Wally was the kind of guy whose name came up whenever something suspicious happened that couldn't quite be tied to anyone else. A logging truck vandalized, a convenience store robbed, but not too badly. A rival's tires mysteriously slashed 3 nights before an election. Wally had done time in another state years back. No one ever said what for exactly, but the way they lowered their voices when they mentioned it said enough. He lived out by the river in a wide trailer with too many old cars out front. He had cousins in half the county. He fixed things on the side, engines, fences, problems. The sheriff had locked him up once on a DUI, back when he was still deputy. But since then, they'd reached a kind of equilibrium. Wally respected power, and power, in turn, looked the other way when certain lines were blurred. The call lasted less than 3 minutes. "Need a favor," the sheriff said. "That right?" Wally replied, his accent thicker when he was feeling someone out. "Last time we talked, you were putting cuffs on me. What changed?" "I'm in a situation," the sheriff said. "Something personal. You hear things. You know things I need to make sure certain conversations don't end up in the wrong hands." Silence crackled on the line. "You talking about your little TV drama?" Wally asked finally, a smirk practically audible. "Everybody's seen that sheriff can't keep his pants zipped young waitress, wife mad as a wet hen. Hell of a show." "This isn't funny, Wally," he snapped. "Oh, it's funny from where I'm sitting," Wally replied. "Ain't every day the law comes crawling to the outlaw." "I need to know," the sheriff said tightly. "If there's any potential threat to my family, people talk, rumors spread. Sometimes folks get ideas. You hear anything about someone looking to hurt us? To take advantage of the situation?" There it was. Not a request, not yet. Just a question disguised as concern. Another pause. Somewhere on Wally's end, a TV played faintly. "Can't say I have," Wally drawled. "But you know how it is once somebody smells blood." "If something were to happen," the sheriff cut in, swallowing his pride, "I'd like to know before it gets here. I'd be willing to compensate anyone who could prevent it." "Prevent it?" Wally repeated slowly. That's a word folks like you use when you don't want to say the other word.
There is no other word, the sheriff said quickly. I'm talking about information.
Just information.
Uh-huh, Wally said. Why don't you let me make a few calls? See what sort of conversations are going around.
I'll let you know if I hear anything. He hung up. The sheriff stood in the kitchen, phone still in his hand, staring at the reflection of his own face in the dark window. He told himself he'd just asked for eyes and ears. He told himself that was different than asking for anything else. This is how it starts, people say later, when they're trying to understand how a line got crossed. One little step, one tiny exception. One time saying, this is just an information gathering operation, when what you really want is someone to make your problem vanish. But at that point in the story, nobody knew about the call except the two men who'd made it, and one woman who'd quietly added a listening app to the phone bill months earlier. Remember that day in the prosecutor's office when Linda laid down her envelope and was told she needed something concrete? She'd gone home with that word humming in her head like a wasp. Concrete. She'd spent years being married to a man whose whole job was building cases she knew how evidence worked, even if she wasn't the one signing the warrants. She started small. She checked their joint bank account every night, making notes of cash withdrawals, gas station receipts, nowhere near his usual routes. She'd already gone through his phone once. The night she'd found the texts, he'd changed his passcode after that. But he wasn't the only one on the plan. Their phone bill had a feature he'd never bothered to learn about. Detailed call logs, options for parental controls, the ability to add certain monitoring apps for safety and security. You'd be surprised how much you can learn from what your husband doesn't think you're looking at. She saw the number he'd called that night. An unfamiliar cell, registered under a corporate shell. Short call, exactly 2 minutes and 37 seconds. She saw the same number reappear 2 days later, longer call this time. She called in a favor from a cousin in IT at the bank. Can you help me put something on a phone? She asked. Just to make sure my husband's not drinking himself to death. He's been... Not himself. Grief makes people generous. The cousin didn't ask too many questions. A week later, when the sheriff fell asleep on the couch, his phone on his chest, she moved like a woman who'd been rehearsing in her head for days. Install. Tap hide. Return concrete. The next time he called that number, she listened. The app recorded everything. His voice tight and low. The other man's lazy and amused. The talk of preventing threats. The offer to compensate anyone who could prevent it. She listened to it 3 times, alone in her bedroom, earbuds in. The words didn't say what her fear was already translating them into, not yet. But they were close enough. They were enough to confirm the thought that had been growing in a dark corner of her mind. He is not going to protect me from this. He's going to protect himself. That night, she stood at the kitchen sink looking out at the backyard where they'd once hosted barbecues and made a psychic shift. Up until then, the story in her head had been, my husband betrayed me, and I am the victim. Now it became, my husband is willing to let me be collateral damage in his mess. I will not be collateral. Something inside her switched off. That can be very dangerous. The national news really locked onto the story after the second wave of leaks. This time, not just text messages, but audio clips from inside the Clay house. Yelling, slamming doors, muffled sobs. These weren't released by the mistress or the sheriff or the prosecutor. They came from an anonymous source. On TV, they blurred out the background noise and cleaned the audio. You could hear his voice and hers. You think I wanted this? He yelled. You think I planned it this way? What you wanted doesn't matter anymore, she shot back. What you did does. I told you I'm trying to fix it, he said. I'm doing everything I can to what? She demanded. To make her disappear? To make the baby disappear? Or are you planning on making me disappear too once I've outlived my usefulness standing next to you in those campaign photos? Don't be ridiculous, he said sharply. Am I? She replied. Because I heard you on the phone, Danny. I heard you asking about preventing threats. I heard you offering money. How far are you really willing to go? The clip cut there intentional or just where the recorder had stopped? The commentators speculated for days. There was something almost obscene about the way people chewed on their pain. Millions of viewers across the country watching two people's marriage implode like it was entertainment. They'd show his face, then hers side by side, while pundits asked questions about temperament and judgment and the culture of law enforcement. They showed Elena only briefly, a grainy photo of her leaning against her car, stomach just beginning to round, face turned away from the camera. She has not spoken publicly, the anchor would say, but sources close to her say she feels abandoned and afraid. Abandoned, afraid. Those two words slipped through the screen and lodged somewhere deep in the public's chest. People started taking sides. Some saw her as a temptress. Some saw her as a victim. Some saw the sheriff as a hypocrite. Some saw him as a man who'd made a mistake and was being crucified for it. But almost no one was really looking at the wife. Not yet. It was the revenge plot headline that finally pushed the story from scandal to sensation. Every news organization wants its own angle. The first network had broken the affair. The second had gotten the audio. The third needed something bigger. They found it when a reporter named Karen Mendoza showed up in town. Karen was the kind of journalist who liked to sink her teeth into a story and not let go. She was known for long-form investigations that took months and ruined careers. She had sharp eyes and a softer voice than you'd expect. She came into the diner, different waitresses now, no Elena, and sat at the counter with a notebook. She introduced herself to people politely. She didn't push too hard at first. But she had a talent for getting people to talk. She spoke to deputies off the record, to neighbors, to that assistant at the prosecutor's office, to a clerk at the phone store who remembered a frantic woman asking how to pull up call logs. And then she did something no one else had thought to do. She requested the sheriff's official phone records through a public information request. It took time. The county stalled. They'd never had someone from a big network come poking around like that before. But stone walls crumble under enough pressure, and eventually, the logs landed in her hands. She sat alone in her motel room, spread them out on the bed, and traced patterns with her pen. There were the expected calls, to deputies, to the prosecutor, to county officials. There were the calls to the mistress, fewer than there had been, but still there late at night, early in the morning. And then there were the calls to that unregistered number. Short at first, then longer, increasing in frequency. There was one pattern that made her sit up straighter. Every time there was a flare-up in the media coverage, every time a new leak dropped or a story went wider, there was a call from the sheriff to that number. Within hours, there would be calls from that number to other numbers, many of them burner phones that appeared once and never again. It looked like a little constellation of crisis. She circled them. Drew lines made a chart. She tracked those burner numbers backward. Some dead ends. A few connected to cheap phones bought with cash from the gas station out on Route 19. She went there, flirted a little with the clerk, asked if he remembered anyone buying a bunch of phones. "Yeah," he said, "that Wally fella. Comes in every so often, buys 2 or 3 cheap ones, pays in cash. Says they're for his business associates." "Business," she repeated, writing down the name. "What kind of business is he in?" The clerk grinned. "The kind you don't put on a business card," he said. She found Wally's address, drove out there. He met her on the sagging front steps, cigarette between his fingers. "News lady, huh?" he drawled. "You're a little far from New York City." "I'm from Houston, actually," she said, "and I'm just here to ask a few questions." "I'll bet you are," he replied, amused. "Let me guess about our fine sheriff and his troubles with the ladies." "And his friends," she said, eyes steady. "Friends like you." He laughed. "I wouldn't say we're friends," he replied. "Acquaintances, maybe man in his line of work, man in mine. Paths cross sometimes." She held up her notebook. "Phone records show he's called you a lot lately," she said. "Especially after stories about him broke you talking about the weather." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he blew out smoke and stepped down off the porch. "You talk pretty," he said. "I'll give you that. But I'm not gonna play your little game. Folks around here got long memories. Sheriff's done his share of favors. I don't owe you nothing." She studied him. "What if I told you," she said slowly, "that he's been talking too? About you, about calls, about favors, about preventing threats." His eyes flickered. "You can't prove that," he said, but there was a crack in his voice now. "I have audio?" She lied. She didn't. "Not of that call, not yet. I have people willing to talk, and if they talk, your name's the one that's going to be in the headlines." Not his local criminal mastermind. Alleged hitman. He scoffed, but his jaw clenched. "That's a big word to be throwing around," he said. "Hitman. It's not my word. she replied, reading his body instead of her notes.
It's the word his wife used. His head snapped slightly.
What do you know about his wife? He asked carefully. Enough to know she's been recording things, she said. And she's angry people do unpredictable things. They go to prosecutors, they go to reporters. They look for someone to blame. His gaze went distant for a moment, calculating. I don't want your life, she said, softening her tone. I just want the truth. And the truth is, there's more going on here than an affair. There are calls. There's cash moving in strange ways. There's a girl who feels threatened, and a wife who feels betrayed, and a sheriff who feels cornered. Cornered people look for exits. Sometimes the exits involve other people getting hurt. He flicked the cigarette into the dirt, grinding it out. You want to talk about threats? He said. Fine. You might want to be looking at the missus as much as you're looking at him. Why? She asked. Because when a man calls me about preventing threats, I usually tell him it'll cost him, Wally replied. But this time I told him something else. I told him he ought to worry less about the girl and more about the woman he shares a bed with. Hell hath no fury, ain't that what they say? Is that from personal experience? She asked. He smiled tightly. You reporters, he said, always trying to make poetry out of people's worst days. He turned to go back inside. Wait, she said, did the sheriff ever ask you to hurt someone? He stopped, hand on the doorframe, his shoulders tensed. Not in so many words, he said finally, and I didn't take his money. Why not? She asked. He looked back at her. Because I ain't stupid, he said. Men like him, they like having someone they can blame when their conscience starts keeping them awake. If anything ever happened to that girl or his wife, you think he's going to stand up and say, I asked for this? No. He's going to point his finger at the nearest criminal and say, it was him. I ain't interested in being his scapegoat. Let them kill each other in their own ways. The words hung there, heavier than he meant them. Is that what you think's going to happen? She asked quietly. He shrugged, eyes tired. I think when you push people far enough, he said, they either break or they bite. And I've seen the look in that woman's eyes. She ain't breaking. The revenge plot headline came 2 nights later. It wasn't entirely accurate. It wasn't entirely false either. Like most explosive headlines, it contained just enough truth to burn and just enough speculation to keep viewers hooked. Sources close to the investigation, the segment began, now alleged that the sheriff's wife may have explored options to take revenge on both her husband and his mistress. Phone records, audio recordings, and interviews suggest that there was talk, not only of exposing the affair, but of something far darker, a hired hitman. They showed a graphic, 3 faces, his, hers, and Elena's, connected by red lines like some true crime board. Then they added a 4th face, Wally's mugshot from years ago. The anchor's tone grew somber. While no money is known to have exchanged hands, and no attack ultimately occurred, the alleged conversations raised deeply troubling questions. Just how far was this betrayed wife willing to go? And was the sheriff trying to stop a violent act, or considering one? You could almost hear the audience leaning in. They played snippets of audio, not of Wally, but of that heated kitchen argument. How far are you really willing to go? She'd asked. Off-screen, the anchor said, some legal experts say this could be interpreted as evidence of a premeditated plan or at least contemplation of violence. They didn't play what she said next, recorded a few minutes later, almost too quietly to catch. You're not the only one who has people who owe them favors, she'd whispered. You're not the only one who knows how to scare someone. That part never made it past the editing room. It was in the longer version of the recording, the one only a few people in the prosecutor's office heard. In living rooms across the country, people shook their heads, some at her, some at him, some at the whole rotten mess. The sheriff's lawyer issued a statement the next morning. My client, he said, has never solicited, suggested, or supported any act of violence against any person. Any implication otherwise is defamatory. The so-called revenge plot is nothing more than overheated speculation based on out-of-context fragments of a marriage in crisis. Sheriff Clay is a good man who made a mistake, not a criminal mastermind. No mention of his wife except to say she was struggling and asks for privacy. No mention of the girl except to call her a private citizen dealing with a deeply personal situation. Nobody got privacy after that. Not really. The tragedy didn't happen all at once. It built in small increments, like water behind a dam. The first crack came when Elena finally told her mother. She chose a Tuesday afternoon, 2 months before her due date. They were in the kitchen, her mom chopping onions, country music on the radio. The air smelled like oil and soap and something frying. "I need to tell you something," Elena said. Her mom didn't look up. "What, baby?" she asked. "I'm pregnant," she said. The knife stopped mid-chop. Her mom's hand hovered above the cutting board. Slowly, she put the knife down and turned. "What?" she asked, her face white. "I'm pregnant," Elena repeated, voice shaking. 6.5 months. Her mom's eyes dropped to her stomach, then snapped back up. "Who?" she demanded. "Who did this to you?" The wording, "to you," made something in Elena soften despite everything. "It's complicated," she said. "He's older." Her mom's eyes narrowed. "Married?" she asked. "A beat." "Yes," Elena whispered. Her mom's face flushed crimson. "You stupid, stupid girl," she breathed. "You think you're the first one to believe his lies? To think he'd leave his wife? Men like that don't leave. They just add more people to the list of hearts they break." "He said he—" "I don't care what he said," her mom snapped. "Who is he?" Elena swallowed. "You're going to find out anyway," she said. "Everyone will. But I want you to hear it from me." She took a breath. "It's Sheriff Clay," she said. The name hung in the air like smoke. Her mom stared at her, eyes wide. "No," she said. "No, he came here. He brought casseroles when your daddy died. He prayed with us. He's the father," Elena cut in. "He knows he's trying to make it go away. Not the baby me. Us, he wants to keep us quiet." Her mom stumbled back a step, reaching for the counter. "You told me he was a good man," she whispered. "I thought he was," Elena said, tears spilling now. I thought maybe we could be a family." He said he'd take care of us. And now he's on TV and his wife is leaking our messages and people are calling me names online. I didn't want this, Mom. I didn't ask for this. I made a mistake, a big one. And now I'm stuck with it and She broke down, sobbing. Her mom crossed the kitchen in 3 steps and grabbed her, pulling her close. "You're not stuck alone," she said fiercely. "You hear me? You're my baby. That baby is my grandbaby. We will figure this out. He doesn't get to just walk away." Later that night, after Elena had gone to bed, her mom sat at the table with a cup of coffee gone cold. She stared at the clock, then at the phone, then out the window at the dark yard. Around midnight, she did something she'd never done in her life. She called a reporter. Not one of the national ones. Not yet. She called a man from the city paper who'd been sniffing around, leaving his card at the diner, saying, "If you ever want to tell your side." She told him. She told him everything. The affair, the promises, the pregnancy. The late-night calls where the sheriff's voice grew cold and distant whenever she asked for something concrete, the way his wife's leak of the messages had turned her daughter into a punchline. She finished with a question. "Is there anything the law can do to make him step up?" she asked, "to protect my daughter from all this?" The reporter paused. "The law can go after him for misuse of office if he used county resources to hide the affair," he said slowly. "There could be civil cases, custody, support. But as far as protecting her from the whispers, from the attention, I can't promise that. But you can tell the truth," she insisted. "You can show people she's not some homewrecker. He's the grown man. He's the one who's supposed to know better." He hesitated again. "If we run this," he said, "it's going to get bigger, you understand? This story's already on a national simmer. You go on the record, the pot's going to boil over." "We're already burning," she replied quietly. "At least let it be for a reason." The next week, the feature ran with her photo and Elena's name. A sympathetic piece, mostly quotes about power dynamics, about how older men find vulnerable young women and make them feel special. Statistics about how often law enforcement gets away with misconduct. It painted the sheriff in a far less flattering light than his lawyer wanted. It painted the mistress not as a villain, but as a victim. It mentioned the wife only briefly. Mrs. Clay declined to comment, it said. But sources say she has been cooperating with local authorities in an ongoing inquiry. The word inquiry did a lot of work in that sentence. It dangled in front of the audience like bait. What's being investigated? Who's under suspicion? What isn't being said? People like Karen, the national reporter, followed that bait. She turned her attention fully onto the wife. If you looked at a photo of Linda before everything, you'd see a woman in her late 40s with soft lines around her eyes, a warm smile, a hairstyle that hadn't changed much since the early 2000s. You'd see someone who volunteered at church potlucks, who brought casseroles to funerals, who remembered your birthday. The photo that started circulating now was different. It was taken when she was leaving the courthouse one afternoon, having met with the prosecutor again. Her hair was pulled back in a tight bun. She wore sunglasses, even though it was cloudy. Her jaw was clenched. Her shoulders were squared. She looked like someone walking into a wind. The caption beneath it read, "The other woman, sheriff's wife at center of alleged revenge plot." They started doing what they always do, pulling up old yearbook photos, interviewing former classmates, talking to co-workers. She was always so put together, one bank colleague said. The kind of person who organized the birthday cards. I never imagined. People snap, a talking head said on one show. You take a woman who's built her whole identity around being the good wife, the good mother, the sheriff's spouse, and you take that away. You humiliate her on a national scale. Some of them just break. That's one narrative, another pundit replied. But there's another. What if she wasn't just a victim? What if she was a co-conspirator? She leaked those messages. She made recordings. She approached prosecutors. That's not passive, that's strategic. They debated her like she was a character on a show. They never had to sit across from her at a kitchen table while she stirred sugar into her coffee, like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to the world. Karen did. She requested an interview. Official channels said no comment. The lawyer advised against it. Friends advised against it. Her daughter begged her not to. But one night, when the house was too quiet and the glow of her husband's old campaign commercial flickered across the muted TV, she picked up her phone and called the number on the card Karen had left in her mailbox. If we talk, she said, it has to be on my terms. Name them, Karen replied. No cameras, she said, just audio. And you use my voice as little as possible. I don't want them picking apart my tone on TV. I know how people are. Agreed, Karen said. What else? You don't cut and paste my words to make your own story, she continued. If you use a quote, you use the whole thought, not just the parts that make me sound crazy. I can promise to be fair, Karen said. I can't promise I'll only show you in the best light. That's not how this works. I don't need to be in the best light, she replied. I just need to not be turned into a cartoon. There was a long pause. This isn't about revenge, she added softly. At least not in the way they think. What is it about? Karen asked. It's about not disappearing, she said. They met 2 days later in a park just outside town, where the trees were thick enough to screen them from prying eyes. They sat on a bench. Karen turned her recorder on and set it between them. That day you went to the prosecutor, Karen began. What did you want? I wanted someone with power to tell me I wasn't crazy, she said. I wanted someone to say, yes, this is wrong. Yes, fact that he's sheriff matters, not because it protects him, but because it makes it worse. Did you want him punished? Karen asked. She paused. If I say no, I'm lying, she said. Did I want him to suffer like I was suffering? Yes, but I also knew if he went down, we went down. Our house, our retirement, our daughter's future, so I was torn. I wanted justice, but I didn't want to set my own life on fire. So why leak the texts? Karen asked. She looked out over the water. Because he was still lying, she said. Even after he got caught, he was talking to her, telling me it was over, and then telling her to just hang on. He wanted to have it both ways. He wanted me to stand next to him at press conferences with a supportive smile while he kept her on a string. I thought, if the whole world sees, he can't pretend anymore. He can't spin it. He can't control the narrative. People say that leak destroyed your marriage, Karen said. Do you agree? She gave a small, humorless laugh. My marriage was already destroyed, she said. The leak just made sure I wasn't the only one sifting through the rubble. Karen hesitated, then asked the question she knew she had to. There's talk, she said, about a revenge plot, about you looking into hiring someone, is that true? Silence stretched between them. It depends what you mean by hiring, she said finally. I asked questions. I asked how easy it was for someone with a badge to make things happen, to make people scared, to make people quiet. I asked who he went to when he didn't want his fingerprints on something. Who did you ask? Karen pressed. She looked at her. I'm not giving you names, she said. I'm not going to hand you someone to feed to the cameras, but I will tell you this. When you live your whole life next to a man who uses fear as a tool, it gets inside you. You start thinking in those terms. What would scare him? What would make him feel as helpless as I feel? And what did you come up with? Karen asked gently. Her eyes hardened. The truth, she said simply. That's what scares men like him, not bullets. Not fist exposure, loss of control. So I made sure the truth got out. The texts, the recordings, the calls. I didn't have to arrange for anyone to be hurt. All I had to do was let him show the world who he really was. But there's that audio, Karen said quietly. The part where you say, you're not the only one who has people who owe them favors. People hear that and think you were planning something more. Let them think what they want, she replied. They already think I'm either a saint or a monster. The reality is messier. I was angry, I was hurt. I said things I shouldn't have. I thought things I'm not proud of. But thinking isn't doing. She looked up, meeting Karen's eyes. If that girl had ended up dead, she said, I would have turned myself in the second I heard, because even if I didn't do it, I would have felt like I'd helped create the conditions. That's what people don't understand. You don't need to pull a trigger to be part of a tragedy. You just have to light enough matches. Karen sat back, studying her. Do you still love him? She asked. She closed her eyes for a moment. That's the cruelest part, she said, voice breaking. Some days, yes. Some days I wake up and I forget for half a second and I remember the boy he was. The man who took 2 jobs when our daughter was a baby. The one who rubbed my feet at the end of long days, who brought me wildflowers he picked from the ditch. And then I remember the text where he told her he'd give up everything for her. And I realize I'm not in that sentence. And the girl? Karen asked. How do you feel about her? She opened her eyes. I hate her, she said, and I feel sorry for her. Both can be true. I hate what she represents. I hate that when people look at her, they see young, pretty, new, and when they look at me, they see old, used, leftover. I hate that she got the version of him that still wanted to impress someone. I got the one who took me for granted, but I also remember being 20. I remember wanting to be seen. If he hadn't been sheriff, if he'd just been some guy in jeans and a t-shirt, would she have said yes? I don't know, does it matter? The power imbalance is the same. She paused. I bought a gun, she said suddenly, surprising even herself. Did you know that? Karen's pen stilled. No, she said. I didn't. After the first national story aired, she continued, I went to the sporting goods store and bought a handgun, said it was for protection. The clerk didn't ask protection from what? She looked down at her hands, flexing them. I kept it in the nightstand, she said, loaded. There was a night. I woke up and he wasn't in bed. I heard him in the living room, talking quietly. I thought he was on the phone with her. I got up. I walked to the doorway. I had the gun in my hand. I just stood there, watching him pace. He never saw me. I stood there for a full minute. Maybe 2. I thought about how easy it would be, 1 shot. And the story, and the humiliation, and the questions. Her voice grew barely audible. I put it back, she said. I went to bed. Not because I'm morally superior. Not because I'm incapable of violence. But because I thought, if I do this, then he wins twice, once for betraying me. Once for turning me into the thing they already think I am. She looked at Karen again. I'm not saying I didn't think about revenge, she said. I'm saying my revenge was waking up every day and continuing to exist. Making sure he had to see me. Making sure every time he looked at the TV, he saw what he'd done to himself. Karen clicked off the recorder. Thank you, she said. Make it count, Linda replied. Tragedy has a way of choosing its moment. You'd think it would happen at the height of the drama, when the headlines are the loudest, when everyone's watching. But in this case, it came on an ordinary Wednesday afternoon in late autumn, when the leaves had just started to fall and people were more concerned about raking than rumors. Elena had been having Braxton Hicks contractions for days, practice contractions, the nurses called them. Her due date was 3 weeks away. She was tired, swollen, and ready to be done. Her mom had taken time off work to stay home with her. Around 3 p.m., her back started to ache. The contractions grew more regular. She timed them on her phone. 10 minutes apart, then 8. Then 7. "Mom!" she called from the couch, breathless. "I think this is it." Her mom grabbed the hospital bag they'd packed weeks earlier, helped her to the car, and drove, hands tight on the wheel. On the way, they passed the courthouse. There were fewer reporters out front now. The story had cooled a bit, displaced by midterm elections and some celebrity scandal. But a couple of cameras remained, always ready in case something flared up again. One of them caught the Clays' SUV turning out of their driveway at the same time. He was headed to a meeting with his lawyer. He saw the reporters. He didn't see the blue sedan pulling out of a side street until it was too late. The collision wasn't spectacular, not the kind that gets replayed on the news in slow motion with dramatic music. It was a glancing hit, metal crunched. Glass shattered, airbags deployed. Both cars spun, no one died, but the crash rippled outward. The sheriff's SUV slammed into a light pole, bending it at the base. One of the reporters dove out of the way, camera falling, lens cracking. The video it captured, crooked and shaky, would still make it onto the evening news. You see his face through the windshield, dazed, blood trickling down from a cut on his forehead. You see his hands fumbling with the seatbelt. You see him pushing the airbag aside, struggling out of the vehicle. You see the frustration, the moment of raw anger, before he schools his features. In the emergency room, as he sat on a gurney with a cervical collar around his neck, he heard a nurse in the hallway say, "We got a pregnant girl in active labor in room 6, 20 years old. Car ride must have kicked it into high gear." His stomach dropped. "Name?" another nurse called. "Elena," came the reply. Elena Morales. The world tilted. He stared at the ceiling tiles. His heart pounded. His hand twitched toward the curtain, then froze. He didn't go see her. He told himself it was because of the cameras out front, because of his lawyer's advice, because he didn't want to make things worse for her by showing up and turning her delivery into a press circus. He told himself that as he signed discharge papers, as he walked to his car with a bandage over his eyebrow, as he drove home on painkillers. He didn't know that his wife's car wasn't in the driveway when he got there. She wasn't at the house. She was at the hospital. No one filmed her walking through the sliding doors. She wore jeans, a sweatshirt, and a ball cap pulled low. She could have been any woman visiting any patient. She moved with purpose, though. Checked the board, asked a nurse where labor and delivery was. Walked down the corridor with its pastel murals and posters about breastfeeding. She stopped outside room 6. Inside, she could hear soft moans, the murmur of a nurse coaching, the steady beep of a monitor. She stood there, breathing hard, hand hovering over the door handle. 100 thoughts raced through her mind. She imagined walking in and screaming, throwing things, telling the girl exactly what she thought of her. She imagined grabbing her by the shoulders and shaking her and saying, "Why my husband? Why my life?" She imagined reaching for the IV, the machines, the fragile connection that tethered them all to this moment, and yanking. Instead, she did something that surprised even her. She knocked. There was a pause. Then a tired voice said, "Come in." She pushed the door open and stepped inside. Elena lay in the bed, hair plastered to her forehead, face flushed with effort. Her mom sat beside her, holding her hand. Both turned to look. For a second, no one spoke. Then the older woman's eyes widened. "You," she said. Linda swallowed. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she said, voice low. I heard at the ER desk. I wanted to see." "What do you want?" Elena's mom asked, rising from the chair, body tense. "Nothing," she replied quickly. I know you don't owe me anything. Least of all a shred of kindness, but I thought, maybe you deserve something from me." She looked at Elena. "He's not coming," she said simply. A flash of pain crossed the younger woman's face, different from the physical kind. "I know," she whispered. "I thought maybe you didn't," she said. "I thought maybe you were still hoping that he'd walk through that door and say all the right things. That he'd hold your hand and say he was sorry, that he was ready to start over. He's not going to." "Do you want credit for telling her that?" her mom snapped. "No," she replied. I don't even know what I want, closure. That's what they call it on TV, right?" She took a step closer. "I'm not going to pretend I forgive you," she said to Elena. "I'm not going to pretend I see you as some innocent child." You knew he was married. You made choices. So did he. You both broke something that can't be fixed. "But that baby," Her voice caught. "That baby didn't ask for any of this," she said. She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. "I talked to a lawyer," she said, "separate from his... This is a draft of a custody and support agreement. It acknowledges paternity. It sets out child support. It gives you full legal custody. He'll fight it. His lawyer will say it's premature, that we should wait for a DNA test. But he knows we all know. If you sign it, and I do, and he does, it becomes a legal obligation. He can't just walk away." She placed the envelope on the tray table. "Why are you doing this?" Elena asked, voice small. "Because if I don't," she said, "I'm complicit in his cowardice. Because if I don't, he gets to be the victim in his own mind. The poor man whose wife turned on him, whose mistress trapped him. No, I want him to remember, every month when that money comes out of his account, that there's a living consequence to his choices." She looked at the younger woman's belly. "You can name him whatever you want," she said softly. "You don't have to tell him about me. You don't have to ever speak my name again. But maybe someday, when he's old enough, you can tell him that his father had a chance to do the right thing. Even if he didn't take it easily, the world made him." "Why should she trust you?" her mom asked. She looked at her. "You shouldn't," she said. "If I were you, I'd hate me, I'd blame me for leaking those messages, for making your daughter's life hell, and you'd be right. I did that. I won't pretend I did it for noble reasons. I did it because I was drowning. But I'm here now because I don't want him to be the only one who gets to act like he has any control over this story." She took a step back. "I'll leave," she said. "You don't have to decide now. I needed to do this. For me, for him, for you." She turned to go. "Linda," Elena said. She stopped. "I'm sorry," the younger woman whispered, "for what I did. For what this has done to you. I know sorry doesn't fix anything. But I am." Tears filled her eyes. "I believed him," she said. "That's my sin. I believed him when he said he could be someone he never really was. I thought maybe I could save him. That's what stupid girls like me think when older men come along, that we're special, that we're different. I was just next." A contraction hit then, cutting off her words. She grimaced, gripping the bedrail. "Breathe," the nurse said, coming in. Linda stood there for one heartbeat longer, watching her. Then she slipped out into the hall. She didn't see the way Elena's mom picked up the envelope, hands shaking. She didn't hear the wail of a newborn an hour later, slicing through the hospital air like the sound of something both ending and beginning. She definitely didn't know that, 3 floors down, her husband was filling out discharge papers, asking for more painkillers than he really needed. The tragedy that would make the headlines didn't happen in that delivery room. It happened the next day. They called it an incident. The official report was dry. At approximately 9:15 a.m., deputies were dispatched to a domestic disturbance at the Clay residence. Upon arrival, they found Mrs. Clay on the front porch with a firearm in her hand. Sheriff Clay was inside, uninjured. No shots were fired. Mrs. Clay surrendered the weapon without resistance. The unofficial version spread faster. She pulled a gun on him, people said. She was going to shoot him or herself, or both. I heard she was pointing it at the TV, someone else said. Screaming at the screen, at the reporter, saying, "You did this. You turned us into a circus." I heard he called 911 on her, another voice added. Imagine that the sheriff calling. "You know, when this story first broke on the news, most of us watching probably thought we had it all figured out. The bad guy, the victim, the villain. We love stories where we can pick a side and feel righteous about it. But the truth is, real life doesn't work that way. There are no clean heroes in a story like this. Just broken people making choices that seemed right in the moment, or necessary, or maybe just inevitable when you've been pushed far enough. A young woman looking for someone to see her. A man who convinced himself his lies were justifiable. A wife who spent 30 years building a life only to watch it become a punchline on national television. None of them set out to destroy each other. But destruction doesn't always need intention. Sometimes it just needs enough hurt, enough pride, and enough silence where honesty should have been. The saddest part, somewhere in the middle of all this chaos, a baby was born. A child who'll grow up Googling their parents' names and finding headlines instead of love letters, who'll piece together their origin story from court documents and news clips and whispered conversations that stop when they walk into the room. And maybe that's the real tragedy here, not the affair, not the leaked texts, not even the gun on the porch or the cameras or the shame. It's that in the end, when everyone was so focused on revenge and reputation and who could hurt who the worst, they forgot that love, real love, isn't about winning. It's about protecting the people you're supposed to cherish, even when it costs you something. Especially then. This story didn't have to end the way it did. But once people start keeping score instead of keeping faith, once they start choosing pride over grace, well, that's when you cross a line you can't uncross. We all like to think we'd handle it better, that we'd be stronger, wiser, more forgiving. But until you're standing in that kitchen at 2 a.m, staring at your spouse's phone, heart pounding, world crumbling, you don't really know who you'd become. Maybe the lesson here isn't about judging them. Maybe it's about asking ourselves, when we're hurt, when we're humiliated, when we're pushed to that edge, what kind of person do we become? Because that choice, that's the one that matters most. I want to hear from you. What did you think about this story? Did it make you see things differently? Did it remind you of something you've been through or someone you know? Drop a comment below and let's talk about it. No judgment here, just honest conversation. And if this story moved you, if it made you think or feel something real, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We're diving into more true stories like this one. Stories about real people facing impossible choices. Stories the headlines don't always get right. Thanks for listening all the way through. It means more than you know. I'll see you in the next one.